Howdy, everybody. It's your boy Alma Bean, and this is episode 2 of Being on the Scene. There has been plenty that has gone on in the last 7 days that we are going to be covering here, whether it's the transfer portal, college basketball, Utah Hockey Club, and the Utah Jazz. All of that is going to be right here on this episode. So why not just jump on in? First thing that we're going to cover today is going to be the transfer portal. Granted, in our previous episode, I covered what had happened over the last month, but now that we are going to be going at a week to week basis, there's not going to be as much to follow. So, with BYU, Max Alford, he is somebody that just came in. He came from Utah State, one of their linebackers. He had a very productive first season at Utah State. But he ended up having 40 total tackles, 24 solos, 16 assisted, including two monster games against New Mexico and Wyoming, where together he totaled 14 tackles, 8 solo, 6 assisted, but then had a season-ending knee injury in the season opener against Iowa in 2023. The only game that he played in this year was against Temple in their loss. So there's still a lot of potential that he does have, especially after what he was able to do in his first season. But, you know, it's just a crazy portal across the board. So with him going from Utah State to BYU, he's going to see much stronger competition, and hopefully he'll be able to peek through in that defensive unit for the Cougars. But only time will tell what he'll be able to do. On the way out, Isaiah Moa, he transferred from BYU to Michigan State at the exact same position. So Alford comes in to fill the position that Moa is leaving open. He played 8 games for BYU, 16 total tackles, 8 solo, 8 assisted. He had a standout game against Kansas State where he had 4 total tackles, 3 of them solo, 1 of them assisted, and a forced fumble. And with moving from the Big 12 to the Big 10, you're going to see more consistent, tough competition, but there is definitely a larger variety of these are your top dogs and these are your lower teams and lower caliber teams that you should be able to get some wins against. And that's all BYU has done over the last week. We are kind of now in the slower period now. If I'm not mistaken, now coaches are able to speak with other transfer players as well. So you'll probably see more activity in the transfer portal in the coming weeks. But the first phase, early signing, all that is out of the way. So we're going to see things slow down just a tad bit. For the University of Utah, like I stated in the last episode, just before I started recording, Nate Johnson from Vanderbilt did commit to the University of Utah. Granted, in his first stint, he was just a quarterback for the most part, but you could definitely tell that he had a lot of power in those legs of his, but wanted to have a larger role. And unfortunately, that didn't happen at Vanderbilt. In his previous stint with Utah in 2022 and 23, he had 515 total yards. He was 40 for 73 on the year, which is just shy of 55%, had 4 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. But like I stated, his legs were the big part of what made him such a great athlete, where he had 286 total yards, 64 carries with 6 touchdowns. Where if you take those numbers, yes, it was 2 full seasons that he had. When you look at his one season at Vanderbilt, facing tougher competition in the SEC, he only threw 3 passes all season, going 1 for 3 for 12 yards. But he did have 11 carries for 114 yards with 1 touchdown, with that touchdown being a 56-yard run in the fourth quarter against Alcorn State on September 7th. So, yes, the numbers are slightly elevated there. You can see what type of competition he was facing and where he was able to excel. But being in the SEC, it just kind of proved that it was probably too tough, which is perfectly fine to come back to Utah. Utah is needing some quarterbacks, but he's also now going to be a wide receiver slash athlete. So I anticipate him to be used in a lot of wildcat formations. You keep the opposing defenses on their toes. But Nate Johnson, he is a freak of an athlete, and I'm super excited to see him in a Utes uniform. Someone else that I'm excited to see in a Utes uniform is Justin Stevenson. He is a wide receiver for Wyoming. He just had his freshman year there, and to be honest, with being a freshman, I think he had a pretty solid year. 17 receptions, 204 yards with 3 touchdowns, along with 5 carries for 40 yards. Um, 63 of those receiving yards were a touchdown reception against Boise State, where it was just a single score game and actually almost spoiled Boise State's season. So to have that sort of an impact in a big game like a game against Boise State, I think Stevenson should be a pretty solid deep threat. Probably even throw him in some slot situations so then he can kind of gather his speed and get going and make his way past that linebacking core for any opposing defense. But Stevenson, I think he'll be an easy plug and play type of guy, especially being a freshman and learning a brand new system with Utah having their new system going into next season. I think he'll fit in just fine. But on the way out, this one kind of hurts for Utah fans. Sam Heward transferred from Utah to USC. He never took a snap in a Utah uniform due to having a surgery for an undisclosed injury that kept him out for the entire 2024 season. But the former 5-star high school prospect, he will be going to his fourth school now after starting at Washington, then Cal Poly, then Utah, and now USC. Some people might look at this move and wonder why he would choose USC after the rivalry that those two schools have, even though they are no longer conference rivals. But it does make sense because his uncle, Luke, is the QB coach at USC. And when you have a head coach like Lincoln Riley, who is known for developing signal callers and getting the best out of those type of players, USC just makes sense. So, yes, it sucks for Utah fans that Heward is going elsewhere, especially USC, but knowing those factors, you kind of have to roll with it. And I do wish him the best. I hope that he's able to get some sort of playing time since he hasn't been able to play since 2023. But when you're a 5-star prospect, you're either super high ceiling or you are going to crash and burn. And I'm still looking to see which one he will be. Granted, I believe that he is more on the high ceiling end, but we need to see him out on the field to get a true perspective on that. Then with Utah State, they haven't had anyone transfer in. Um, they are still a school that is in the midst of changes, whether it's coaching or player personnel, uh, even having the individuals that are still in the transfer portal. Utah State is in kind of a bit of a limbo. So I don't anticipate too many players to transfer into Utah State. But like I stated earlier, Max Alford, who transferred to BYU, he is gone. But also the Aggies lost Lane Spires. He's going into his 6th season as a collegiate athlete. He spent 3 at Bowling Green and 2 at Utah State. But he ended up breaking his toe this year, which kept on setting him back. At first, it seemed like it was just a minor injury, and then it kept on lingering. But he didn't play after their game against Temple on September 21st. But even with only playing those 4 games, he did start all 4 of those games, and he's going to be transferring over to Pittsburgh, a team that is needing a solid edge player like Spires. And given the amount of experience that he has, the level of competition that he's played, Pittsburgh will be a bit difficult for him, in my opinion. But given his age and the impact that he can have immediately, having a seasoned vet like Spires is going to be super impactful. And the Panthers should be super thankful that he is willing to transfer cross country to join their defensive unit. So the transfer portal, again, that was the entire thing. There wasn't a lot going on this week. Again, you have holidays and such within that time frame. People kind of getting back into the swing of things for school as classes are about to start, but there's not a lot of movement going on in the last week. But with college basketball, we have stories for both men and women this episode, and I anticipate to have these stories grow as the year goes on. But the University of Utah women's basketball team, they get their first nod at the top 25, being put at number 22. They are currently 12-2 on the year. Both of their losses are coming against Northwestern, where they lost 71-69, and then their other loss against Mississippi State, where they lost 66-62. So having close losses like that, yes, losses are losses no matter what. But with their other wins, they've been seemingly convincing. So putting them in the top 25, it only makes sense. Their first true big test is going to come tomorrow on January 8th against 12th ranked Kansas State. And that will take place at the Huntsman Center. So if any of you guys are local and want to go cheer on these women and see if they can take on their toughest opponent yet, go to the Huntsman Center, cheer on these girls, and we'll see what happens at the end of that game once that final buzzer rings. And then up in Logan at Utah State, the men get their first crack at the top 25, being number 25 after their 89-83 win over Fresno State. There's super high expectations for this Aggies team to win the Mountain West Division or Conference, the Mountain West Conference, and then go into the NCAA tournament representing the Mountain West. Their biggest competition to take that Mountain West title from them is going to be New Mexico, which they're not even going to play them until February 1st. And then UNLV, who they will face on January 15th. Their next matchup, on the other hand, is going to be tonight against San Jose State, starting at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. Or if you're not willing to wait until the actual tip-off, you can always join us on the KSL Sports Zone on 1280 a.m., starting at 7:30, where you will hear the pregame with Scotty Gerard. Scotty the man. Brain's not functioning at that point. But even with those major stories in college basketball, I highly anticipate that BYU will start getting their footing. Igor Demon, he seemed to hit a little speed bump in his year with the Cougars. And it just seems like there was so much hype in between this offseason and the games that have played so far. But it seems that Providence game really sent them off, and they're just trying to find their footing once again. I do anticipate them to find it, but when, who knows? And the Runnin' Utes, the men's basketball team for the University of Utah, they tend to keep their name in the conversation as far as Utah men's basketball, but they have yet to do anything to set them apart from the pack, in my opinion, at least. Especially being in such a tough division, I don't anticipate Utah to skyrocket in their conference, but I do anticipate them to make some noise. I'm just waiting for that noise to be heard. Now, with the Utah Hockey Club, in our last episode, I made a prediction for Edmonton. I was very wrong. Very wrong. And what makes it worse is that not only was I wrong, but when it comes to the actual scoring, I said Keller was going to get things started on the offensive end for Utah. Connor McDavid was going to be a huge impact player. The only thing I got right was that Jack McBain scored. I thought Jack McBain was going to get the game-winning goal, but instead they lost to Edmonton 4-1. Their next game that they had after that was against Calgary, where they had a 5-3 win. It was a huge confidence builder for them, especially with Lawson Krause getting 2 goals in that game. He was really fishing to get that hat trick, but just never came. Logan Cooley, he came striking on a power play goal, and with that power play goal, he thought that Utah was really going to run away with this one, even with Calgary controlling that second period, scoring 2-1. And this was the first game back for Clayton Keller after he was out the previous game against Edmonton with an illness. But he ended up scoring in his return. So great to see that the captain is still willing to come out and get those goals in there. And then Kevin Stenlin kind of put the nail in the coffin as he got the empty netter. Both teams had the same amount of shots, but Calgary came out super aggressive. They had 36 hits to Utah's 21. And overall, just after Utah hit their slide, they needed a win to get their confidence back up. But you got to find wins where you can, especially with how intense this Western Conference is you just have to find the points where you can, whether it's an overtime or getting your wins, winning your scheduled wins, and not letting teams essentially bully you around just because you might think that you have an edge in one department. So their next game that they had over the last week was against Dallas, which was an overtime loss, 3-2. Um, all of the scoring and regulation came in the second period with Jamie Benn getting the first goal on the board, and then Matthias Michelli just 1 minute later tying things up. And then Oscar Beck, he got a tip in to give the Dallas Stars the 2-1 lead. And it was near the midway point of that period. And then once again, Matthias Michelli, he came in just a couple minutes later and got the scoring back to tie things up 2-2. There was a lot of shots that were going on in the third period. You could tell that Michelli was fishing for that hat trick as well, but there was no luck on either team's side, and we had to go into overtime. Thomas Harley, about 3 minutes into overtime, got a goal on Karel Vejmelka and got Dallas the win. After watching a few replays of that goal, and especially in real time, it looked like there could have been some sort of goalie interference, and even the Utah coaching staff was looking at their tablet trying to figure out, is this something that we can challenge? And granted, me being a new hockey fan, I was like, yeah, challenge it. I can see the Dallas skater, their skates is on Vejmelka's stick. He is unable to move the stick and try and block the shot. So that should be easy goalie interference. But I found out that in overtime, coaches cannot do challenges whatsoever. It has to come from the big boss up top. So there was no call. Utah ended up getting the 3-2 loss, but by no means did I think that it was a bad game. Utah still played with a lot of energy. Uh, Dallas just ended up getting that extra goal that got them the win. But Utah still walked away over the last week, getting 4 points or 3 points. So it's really great to see that they were actually able to make progress um, on the road. But during this road trip, with this illness going around, Liam O'Brien was able to get his first minutes since October 28th against San Jose. Between all three games, he had 6 total shots, 26 minutes and 18 seconds of total time on ice. And then he had 12 penalty minutes, which 10 of them was a misconduct versus Calgary. That also got a misconduct for Calgary's Nazem Kadri. So, with a guy that's as aggressive for Calgary, it was a little chippy. It was a little forced, in my opinion, to get that misconduct. But Utah needed a spark, and they definitely got one from Liam O'Brien in that game. Um, Now, with the games that they have coming up, they have 3 games before our next episode. They are going to be playing tomorrow against the Florida Panthers, and they're going to play on January 10th against the San Jose Sharks, and then on January 11th against the New York Islanders. For the Panthers, it's going to be their first matchup of the season against Utah. I would keep an eye out for Sam Reinhart, who leads the team in points, goals, and assists, which points he has 46, goals he has 22, and assists he has 24. Going into this game tomorrow, there are 5 players that are listed as day-to-day, including Matthew Tkachuk, but all of the projected players that are day-to-day, all 5 of them, they are expected to be available by puck drop. So you might see a little hiccup. You might see 1 or 2 of those players end up not playing, but my anticipation is that the Panthers should be pretty healthy going into this game. This game, it will be nationally televised. So for those of you who have Utah HC Plus or SEG Plus, you will not be able to watch this game there. You will be able to watch it on TNT, True TV, or Max. There's a lot of different options. I do anticipate this game to be a very good game, a very close game. I anticipate Utah to want to come back to the Delta Center and make some noise. So I think that Utah will try and get the 4-3 win. I do believe it'll go into overtime because the Panthers are just such a difficult team to get a win against. But 4-3 Utah. I expect the barn to be loud and proud, and thankfully, I will be in the crowd, so I will be providing my uh, live tweets on X at AlmaBean23. I'll be providing video, photos, and such. And again, I expect the place to be rocking. Uh, their next game against San Jose, it's going to be the third and final meeting. They have split their first two games 1-1. It's going to be the second time that they're going to see the number one pick, Macklin Celebrini, who got one assist in their previous meeting. But each of their games against San Jose has been decided by one goal. So similar to the Panthers game, I do anticipate that game to be 3-2. Um, and I expect the guys that are hot right now to get their goals in there, whether it's Keller or Gunther. And then we'll probably get like a sneaky one in there from Barrett Hayton. I anticipate this game to go 3-2 with San Jose. And then with their game against the New York Islanders, it's their second and final meeting of the season. Utah beat them at the very beginning of the year on their first road trip, 5-4 in overtime. And funny enough, somebody who is no longer with the Utah Hockey Club as far as a hockey club uniform, but still with the organization, Josh Doan, who is now with the Tucson Roadrunners at the moment, he was actually the person that scored the goal to force overtime, where Gunther continued his scoring streak, getting his second goal of the game in overtime. So it's funny to see the rotation that has already come through. Me personally, I would love to see Josh Doan continue to play in a Utah Hockey Club uniform, but I don't get paid to make those decisions. I just get asked to give my opinions. So I know Doan is doing great in the AHL, but I would still love to see him play in Utah at the Delta Center. It'd be absolutely electric and still continue on his father's legacy. Would love to see him play. Um, but outside of what has happened in games, we have seen some promising news with both John Marino and Sean Durzi. Over the last week or so, we've seen them in non-contact jerseys for practice, but we did recently see both of them wearing regular practice uniforms, which is so great to see. Especially with John Marino, he is yet to take the ice in a game for the Utah Hockey Club. Sean Durzi, it's making it look like he's ahead of schedule. Um, but according to Craig Morgan, Marino, he should be available by February 1st, while Sean Durzi is still anticipated to be out for the season. But like I stated before, it's amazing progress to see from both of these defensemen, arguably two of the top defensemen that Utah has. And once they get back on the ice, Vimelka should be sitting up, pulling out a little fold up chair, maybe drinking a little pina colada or something, because that defensive line should be able to help them out tremendously rather than just having guys rotate constantly and not getting into the swing of things with their partners. Um, for the Utah Jazz, um, they've actually had a very interesting week, one that I did not anticipate. As a fan of the game, I'm enjoying how they've played, but being a person that is looking forward to the 2025 NBA draft, I don't know if I'm as excited with how they've played. But uh, they went ahead and faced the New York Knicks, where they lost 119-103. They didn't have Jalen Brunson due to a right calf tightness. And then Karl Anthony Towns, he dropped 31 points, 20 rebounds, and 4 assists, which was the second night in a row where they allowed a player to score 30 plus points and 20 plus rebounds, which is not the greatest thing to do. But then also Josh Hart got a triple double with 15 points, 14 rebounds, and 12 assists, which means in the last 2 games there, the Utah Jazz allowed 3 triple doubles in 2 games. Not something to be very proud of, but 5 of the 8 Knicks that did play, they scored in double digits. Um, on the Utah side, Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton, they led the way for Utah with 25 points. Lauri Markkanen is not looking like himself. He's hitting a pretty bad slump, in my opinion. He shot 6 for 22, 1 for 10 from 3. Just a game that you want to forget. But it seemed like Utah did forget because they went into Miami and got a 136-100 win. That is thanks to the lacking of Jimmy Butler, who was not in uniform because he was serving the first game of a 7-game suspension due to misconduct detrimental to the Heat because he doesn't want to play in Miami anymore. So, I mean, can't really blame him, but Utah capitalized on that opportunity. John Collins did return in this game where he scored 24 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists, along with 3 blocks. But the main story of the night was Bryce Sensabaugh, who got a career high in points with 34, along with 7 rebounds and 2 assists, where he shot 12 for 18 from the field, 7 for 11 from the 3-point line. He was just shooting lights out, and it's starting to seem that he's finally gelling with the speed of the NBA. Um, Even though he was drafted last year and had a lot of minutes in the G League, a lot of people need to realize that he's just now hitting that 60 game threshold in the NBA, which, unless you're a bona fide superstar, that's about where you're going to see rookies really starting to see things and adjust their game to the pace of the NBA. So now in his second year, hitting that threshold, Sensabaugh is looking great. Jordan Clarkson, he only played 3 minutes in that game because he ended up re-aggravating an injury in his foot, which ended up being bad enough to where he got an MRI and will not be reevaluated for about another 2 weeks. Walker Kessler, he's still showing that he is the center that fans wanted him to be with 14 points, 16 rebounds, with 7 of those rebounds being offensive. Um, and to make things even crazier, not only did they win by 36, but in the second quarter, the Utah Jazz out rebounded the Miami Heat 16-1. And um, along with that, even outscored Miami 40-19. So that was really the quarter that set them apart. Um, but even in that game, you can focus on the score. You can focus on the blowouts. You can look at Sensabaugh doing what he did. But you had another Utah connection in this game as Pele Larson went ahead and got some minutes against Utah. He didn't do too much, but again, he was on the floor. Um, he had 10 minutes in the blowout. He had 1.2 rebounds, 2 assists with a block, getting Miami's best plus minus rating of the night at -3. But there's also another name that I haven't mentioned, and that's because he was near invisible against Walker Kessler. Bam Adebayo. Normally, he has a major influence on the offensive and defensive end of the game, but he didn't make a single field goal. All 4 of his points came from the free throw line. Um, and it was just not a game that Bam wants to remember. Tyler Hero, he was also struggling for the entire night. So Utah, in my opinion, got a very lucky win with a very impressive performance by Sensabaugh. Then they had to go and play the very next day against the Orlando Magic, where they got the 105-92 win, which the Orlando Magic, they are starting to hit that injury bug. So there's a lot of players that aren't used to getting 20 plus minutes in a game. So I will give that to them. Um, but even the Utah Jazz, they had plenty of people out as well. They ended up with a starting lineup of Micah Potter, Walker Kessler, Colin Sexton, Johnny Juzang, and Isaiah Collier, which is very far from your normal starting lineup for the Utah Jazz. But they did play with purpose as Walker Kessler had 10 points, 17 rebounds, and 2 assists, along with a block. Collier, I was very excited to see what he can do in a starting unit against a starting lineup for the opposition. He seemed to struggle on the offensive end, getting just 2 points. Like just none of his shots were going in. If I'm not mistaken, he was 1 for 8 from the field. Just not a good offensive night for him, but he was getting the ball moving for the team, leading Utah with 6 assists to go along with 5 boards. Uh, Kyle Filipowski got some really great developmental minutes, getting 12.7 rebounds and 3 assists. Even though he is still lacking on the defensive end, you're starting to see that his offense can make up for his lack of defense. So it allows him to be more playable. But in these developmental games, you are starting to see that it's starting to click for him. Still, some defensive rotations are looking a little confusing for him, at least from my perspective. Um, but overall, I think Filipowski, he's adjusting quite well. There's still quite a bit for him to learn, but overall, I think that he's still on pace to outperform an early second round pick that he was. Bryce Sensabaugh, he showed out once again. He ended up scoring 27 points, which is the first time in his career where he had back-to-back games with 20 plus points, and getting a total of 61 total points in 24 hours. It's absolutely crazy that this guy that a lot of Jazz fans were willing to write off, me included, is having a game like this. Granted, the star players are out, so it's leaving room for him to be able to make this type of jump. But even still, he's showing what he is capable of, and if he is traded, what he can provide for another team. And any team that has Bryce Sensabaugh should be really excited that he can produce so well with the bench unit. Um, Jet Howard for the Orlando Magic, he logged a career high in points with 21. He shot 7 for 16 from the field, along with 4 for 10 from the perimeter. And then Trevlin Queen, which, if that name sounds familiar to anyone, he is a Salt Lake City Summer League vet. If I'm not mistaken, I think I've seen him all 3 years that I have been in Utah and watched the Salt Lake City Summer League. He tied his career high in assists with 6 in 25 minutes of play. Both Jet Howard and Trevlin Queen, they both came off of the bench and they served their team well. Even though they did get the loss, there was a lot of promising play from the bench units for both Utah and Orlando. So even though it's a loss for Orlando, I wouldn't hang my head up on this. You got to see a lot of pieces actually play and see where they need to improve and where you need to focus on their gameplay. Now, with the Jazz's upcoming schedule, there's an interesting bunch that they're going to be playing. You're going to play some playoff caliber teams, and they're going to be playing some teams that are in the trade carousel, and even some teams that you're not even quite sure what they're doing yet. So those games are going to be the first one tonight against the Atlanta Hawks on January 7th. Their next game is going to be against the Miami Heat here in Utah on January 9th. And then Utah will go on a quick one-game road trip to Phoenix on January 11th. And then they will be back home the next day on January 12th to face the Brooklyn Nets. For the Atlanta Hawks, it's going to be the first meeting that Utah has had with them this season. Bogdan Bogdanovic and Trae Young are both considered game time decisions. I will be providing, I will be providing that update as soon as I find out on my Twitter, again at X at Almabean23. I'll also be putting it on my Blue Sky with the same handle. As soon as I find out, I will be in studio tonight. So with that game, if you want to tune into the pregame with Jake Scott and Coach Tim Lacombe, that will be on 97.5 FM, the KSL Sports Zone, starting at 6 p.m. with the hour-long pregame, and then tip-off being at 7 p.m. Mountain. Cody Zeller, Jalen Johnson, and Larry Nance, all of them are anticipated to be out for this matchup, which is really upsetting because Jalen Johnson, in my opinion, is one of those guys that should be in the conversation for most improved. He's just been absolutely killing it and would have made this game even more entertaining. But with him being out, it's going to be rough watching this game, especially if, say, Bogdan Bogdanovic and Trae Young end up both being out for this one as well. You're going to be looking for things to watch in this game. Utah will be without Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, and Keontae George, while both Lauri Markkanen and Bryce Sensabaugh are considered questionable. Markkanen due to his back spasms, and then Sensabaugh due to illness. With how Sensabaugh's been playing as of late, it'd be really upsetting if he's not able to play. With him being on his hot streak, having 61 points over the last 2 games, you would like to see him continue that streak, and being able to do it at home in the Delta Center, the crowd would go crazy. So it would be really great if he can play, but if illness strikes him, again, you'll be fishing for things to watch for tonight because you're just going to be going down that bench unit and it's going to be rough. Atlanta is currently on a 3-game road losing streak, while Utah is currently on a 2-game winning streak. But Utah has a 2-12 record at home. I anticipate a battle in the trenches because the only two starters that are not on this injury list that I expect a big matchup is between Clint Capella and Walker Kessler. Capella is in the top 25 in rebounds per game with 9, while Walker Kessler is 7th in the league in rebounds per game, while also being second in the league in field goal percentage at 71%. I do believe Clint Capella will cause some trouble for Kessler, but if he continues to show the development that he has shown this season, I do anticipate Kessler to win that battle. Um, like I said earlier, if you want to tune into the radio, you can listen to this game on 97.5 FM on the KSL Sports Zone, starting at 6 p.m. for the pregame with Jake Scott and the coach Tim Lacombe, where tip-off will then be at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. If not, you can always tune into Jazz Plus / SEG Plus, starting at 6:30, where you will have your pregame before tip-off starts once again at 7 o'clock. I will personally be in the studio working the 97.5 FM VKSL Sports Zone broadcast. So always would love the support, but I know that it's not for everyone. But again, if you're in the car driving from point A to point B and want to tune in, we would always love the support. And shoot, even reach out to me if you'd like on X at AlmaBean23 or on Blue Sky with the same handle. Would love to hear what you think about the broadcast. And always trying to make things better for you, the listener and viewer. Um, with Miami being the next game, it's going to be their second and final meeting. Jimmy's still going to be out for that game due to his suspension, and Utah will be thankful for it. But Tyler Hero tends to play really well when he comes to Utah. It's right around where his averages are for this season. But this is also including his rookie year where he did not perform as he does now. But he averages 23.3 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, and 5 assists while shooting 42% from the field and 24% from three. And I know that those numbers might not sound as big as they are, but he is shooting a lot. He is shooting close to about 20 attempts per game against the Utah Jazz in Utah. So I anticipate Tyler Hero to go into hero mode because for most Utah Jazz fans will remember his performance on New Year's Eve in 2022, where he hit the game-winning buzzer beater from half court. I was in attendance for that game. It was gut-wrenching. And again, Miami got to ring in the new year with a really exciting win. But I fully anticipate Tyler Hero to be a problem in this game. And then for Phoenix, it's going to be their third meeting of the season. Phoenix is 2-0 at the moment, but they are currently in some turmoil. They recently did say that Yusuf Nurkic and Bradley Beal will now be coming off the bench. They need something to liven up that bench unit, but also with all the trade rumors circulating around Bradley Beal, you don't know if this is a morale thing or if it's anticipation for a trade. I personally believe that it's a trade, just because as of, I don't want to say within the last day or so, Grayson Allen has started to come up in trade rumors that fall line with Bradley Beal. So I expect some sort of shakeup with Phoenix. That is the main destination that Jimmy Butler wants to go to, but that is the most difficult spot for him to try and be traded to, given the lack of assets that they have, since I believe they don't have a first round pick till 2031. But also like cap just doesn't work for the most part unless you're getting rid of Bradley Beal. So it's a really difficult spot for Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal to be in, but overall it's just going to be rough altogether until we've reached that trade deadline and we can finally stop talking about so and so's not happy here, they want to go here, and blah blah blah. On the court, though, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they just seem to tear up Utah every single time. This season, they are both averaging over 30 points per game against the Jazz. So I should expect that to continue. Just every time they play against Utah, just every single shot seems to go in. And I wish I knew how, but that's why superstars are superstars. But then on the rookie end, Ryan Dunn, he's been super impressive this year for Phoenix. I anticipate him to be a sneaky defensive menace, probably getting at least 2 steals against the Jazz. Um, but he's just been absolutely incredible on the defensive end. And he's not a marquee name at the moment, but if his defensive prowess continues, he should be a household name for his defensive ability. And with that game, currently Royce O'Neal is injured, but he is anticipated to be back for that game. So for those Jazz fans that still have a special place in their heart for Royce O'Neal, that will be your game where you will get to see him playing once again. But then the final game of this little week is going to be against Brooklyn. It's going to be their second and final meeting where Utah did beat them the first time. I do anticipate D'Angelo Russell to have a big game since this is the first time that he is playing Utah in a Nets uniform this season. But since the 2022-23 season, which is 8 total games that D'Angelo Russell has played against the Jazz, he's averaging 21.1 points, 4 rebounds, and 7.5 assists, which is way beyond his current averages that he has. So it should be really interesting to see how he is playing with Ben Simmons, which, for those of you who don't know, they played together in high school. So hopefully some of that chemistry will come back out onto the court. But, Ben Simmons, he's been in his weird slump for who knows how long now. And, I just want to watch good basketball. So if that means Ben Simmons pops off and shows why he won Rookie of the Year, that I would love to see him do that. But it's just going to be a crazy game altogether. Cam Johnson, he is projected to be available for that game, but with trade rumors surrounding him and getting louder, it'll be interesting to see how it may affect him since he never wanted to leave Phoenix and got traded out anyways. And that definitely affected him emotionally and mentally when that trade happened. And now he's finally solidified himself as one of the star players for Brooklyn. And now being mentioned that he's going to be out once again. I'm just really curious how that will affect him. But even in that game, you can talk about Nick Claxton and Walker Kessler, them colliding in the paint. You can talk about Cam Thomas and Colin Sexton's matchup and saying those are the marquee things that you're going to be looking out for. But me personally, knowing that Bryce Sensabaugh will most likely still be coming off the bench, I'm really excited to see how he will do against either Keon Johnson or Zaire Williams. I think that's going to be the matchup that will really decide how this team goes. But, the NBA is the NBA. Everything is going to be a coin flip. Injuries happen left and right. But overall, it's going to be a very interesting week for Utah because as a Jazz fan, you're not wanting them to win as much. But having a 2-game win streak, it's the second time they've had back-to-back wins this season. You already have fans that are yelling and screaming like, why are you doing this? You're messing this up. Which down the line, that may be the case. But overall, you want to try and get the best pick possible. You are playing for percentages, not a guarantee. So even with where Utah is now, they're still in that top 5 pick range. I wouldn't stress about it as much. There's still so much talent in that top 5, top 10 range. I'm starting to really lean more into VJ Edgecombe. And like I stated earlier in the episode, Igor Demon, he seemed to hit a roadblock in his development this year, but I just anticipate him to get out of that slump. And then Kasparas Yakachunas, he's been playing great for Illinois as of late. Trey Johnson, he's still playing great for Texas. And then Cooper Flag is Cooper Flag. Like, what else can you say? He's phenomenal. And everybody wants to get the top prize, but I'm trying to get my hopes up to yes, that opportunity will be there, but I am not expecting Cooper Flag to be in a Utah Jazz uniform. So then on draft night, I am not disappointed. I can be optimistic and look forward to the prospects that Utah will be bringing in. So, a lot of sports going on, whether it's collegiate, professional, whether it's basketball, football, hockey. There's so much going on in the state of Utah, and all of these teams deserve love. I only put in 45 minutes of time here, but there's still so much more going on around this state, whether it's Real Salt Lake getting some new prospects in. They're prepping for their season to start here in the next month or so. You have the Utah Warriors with their rugby team, and I'm starting to like watch video of them. They're really great, and I don't understand rugby, but I know that they hit hard. um, but then hearing some of these other things, like even like with soccer for the collegiate side of things, to start off the new year, I asked, "What was your biggest uh, moments for 2024?" And Aggie fan Dan stated that the Utah State women's team, soccer team, winning the championship, like it's phenomenal to see that these programs are excelling in multiple sports rather than seeing a singular school as, oh, you're a football school, you're a basketball school. Um, so I'm hoping as being on the scene develops, we will see the content as far as what Utah sports will be mentioned grow as well. So uh, now we're at the end of the episode. So congrats on sticking around to the end. I appreciate every one of you that tunes in and supports what I'm doing. Makes me feel that it's not all for nothing, and that the move was worthwhile. So again, I'm grateful for anyone and everyone that has tuned in or will tune in. But once again, if you want to go ahead and support what I'm doing, follow me on X at AlmaBean23, on Blue Sky at the same handle, AlmaBean23. You can go to Instagram at AlmaBean15. TikTok is AlmaBean23 as well. Um, it's going to be really exciting to see what comes of this. And if you're willing to support me on socials, by all means, even if it's tuning in for a minute or two to let us know how the broadcast is going, tune into 97.5 FM, the KSL Sports Zone, or 1280 AM to go ahead and tune into tonight's games between the Utah Jazz on 97.5 or the Utah State Aggies on 1280 AM. Again, we appreciate any and everything that you guys do for us. We appreciate the support. And that is your being on the scene. And we will see y'all next time.